If you had told me 10 years ago that in the future we'd be able to play multiplayer games online against other people on other consoles, I don't think I would have believed you. The console wars had really prevented this sort of unification. It seemed like the big console manufacturers had really dug their feet into the ground on this one. But now we're truly blessed that the console manufacturers are finally playing along nice. Thank you, God, for, giving us something. A lot of really big games are leading the charge for the viability of cross-platform play, but getting to this point was not an easy journey. And actually implementing cross-platform play has its own technical limitations. Or does it? It's actually very complicated, but hey, that's what this video is for. Cross-platform play is far from a new concept, but it is recently mainstream with games like Pokemon Unite in the news, which is going to have cross-platform play against mobile and Nintendo Switch. There's also games like Call of Duty Warzone, which is cross-platform and cross-progression across all of the consoles that it's out for. And games like Apex Legends, which is coming out for Nintendo Switch, and it's also going to finally have cross-platform play across all consoles. It's so mainstream that we're mad when a game launches without cross-platform play. Looking at you, Overwatch. The first console games that I could think of to have cross-platform play were actually for the Sega Dreamcast. That's because the Dreamcast shipped with a modem on the console. So games like Quake 3 Arena or Phantasy Star Online were able to play on the Dreamcast with PC players. PC, barely counts as cross-platform play, but you know what? It's a start. I also remember 2007's Shadowrun having cross-platform play between the Xbox 360 and Windows PC. I remember at the time seeing this game and thinking, this is f***ing revolutionary. But then again, it's just Microsoft to Microsoft, and the game sucked. It looks like Final Fantasy XI players were able to play between PS2 and Xbox 360 versions, but this wasn't something that was widely known, aside from Square cryptically listing it as a feature on their site. It seems like something Square didn't want to draw too much attention to, or else they might face the wrath of two of the big three. The pie in the sky dream was to get console manufacturers to play nice with each other. Getting a game to work between bitter rivals seemed like something that could never happen. Recent history has taught us that PlayStation were the ones that were stonewalling cross-platform play, but historically, it has always been the underdog that seemed like they wanted to play nice. In the Xbox 360 days, Microsoft were the ones that didn't care if cross-platform play became a thing. They were the ones that were stonewalling it. And that makes sense. If they have such a firm grip on the console market, it would benefit them to keep users inside that ecosystem. Do you want to play games with your friends? Well, they all have Xboxes, so looks like you're just gonna have to buy an Xbox. In 2011, Stephen Totilo wrote an article for Kotaku about a game called Defiance. That was that MMO third-person shooter that had a tie-in show on Sci-Fi. Yeah, I don't blame you for not remembering this one either. Stephen got to play a demo of the game at a press event. He had basically nothing to say about the game itself, but he was blown away that the demo was running on both Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 through a network connection across platforms. The title of the article was, "I saw the PlayStation 3 wired to play against an Xbox 360, but you won't." The header image had the text, "Impossible future." A quote from the article states, "It wasn't a magic trick. It was multiplayer console gaming without borders, and it won't be coming to a home near you." The game did not launch with cross-platform play, and the developers blamed Microsoft. When approached about this, a Microsoft spokesperson just boasted about the greatness of Xbox Live and said, "Because we can't guarantee this level of quality or control the player experience on other consoles or gaming networks, we currently do not open our network to games that allow this crossover capability." Flash forward to the Xbox One and PS4 era, where the blame was very quickly thrown on Sony. The first cross-platform game that I could remember is Rocket League, allowing cross-platform play between PC, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch. But Sony notoriously didn't play nice. Bethesda's Todd Howard shed more light on the subject, straight up saying Sony is not as helpful as everyone would like. I personally believe that a major factor to all this is that whatever console manufacturer is currently on the top would just be less likely to want to play nice. But the official reason for there not being cross-platform play given by both Microsoft and Sony while they were on top were policy issues. There were slight policy differences between Xbox Live and the PlayStation Network, and when you're dealing with the security of online play and the potential for kids to communicate with adults and all that murky stuff, you want everything to be as safe and buttoned up as possible. However, you could probably gather that this is a whole load of horseshit, because their policies are more or less the same. And these sorts of malicious abuse of the system could happen on any console. And guess what? We have cross-platform play today, and there's no policy issues. Hell, I don't even think any of them fixed their policies to solve this problem. I remember when Minecraft launched on the Nintendo Switch, and then announced cross-platform play with Xbox One. This was a shock to everybody because Microsoft owns Minecraft and its developer Mojang. Was Microsoft being petty, or was this really all Sony's fault? None of the big three console manufacturers see Nintendo as competition. Shuhei Yoshida explicitly said that Nintendo creates new gamers. They introduce users to the world of gaming, and PlayStation is there for them when they're ready to take it up a notch. Nintendo seems perfectly comfortable in their own section of the market, making underpowered, convenient consoles with top-class first-party games. And Microsoft doesn't care where you play their games as long as you're playing their games. It wasn't until Fortnite launched on the Nintendo Switch that people really started to put the pressure on Sony. It launched with cross-platform play across PC, Mac, Xbox, and Switch, but no PlayStation. In fact, if you first played Fortnite with your Epic account on a PlayStation, you just straight up weren't allowed to log in on any other console. This straight up a lot of people, myself included. But it was just Fortnite, so maybe we were really saved? Soon after this, in an attempt to move away from the bad PR, Sony played nice and allowed Epic to implement cross-platform play in Fortnite. And this opened the floodgates for other games to implement cross-platform play with basically no restrictions. This was a huge win for gaming as a whole, but this was only in 2018, just 2 years ago. So it's taking a little bit of time for other developers to catch up. It also wasn't as simple as just flipping a switch. For Psyonix and Rocket League, it kind of was that simple. But for Epic and Fortnite, there were some technical issues, besides the glaring account system issues. On PlayStation, Xbox, and PC, Fortnite runs at 60 frames per second. On Nintendo Switch and mobile, Fortnite runs at 30 frames per second. Normally, there'd be nothing wrong with this. Maybe your reaction time is 1 frame slower on Switch or mobile. Not the end of the world. But it turns out, Fortnite was developed in such a way that DPS, or damage per second, was tied to the frame rate. That means that if you're shooting your gun at a target on Nintendo Switch, you would do less damage in a certain amount of time than you would on PlayStation or Xbox. In order to remedy this problem, Epic decided to just auto-matchmake players on Switch with players on mobile. Otherwise, I'm not sure the problem was ever actually fixed in an update like they planned. You can still play against players on other consoles if you wanted, but by default, if you're on a Switch, you'd be thrown against players on mobile. Even though your damage output is about 5% less on Switch, counterintuitively, the game is way easier on Switch because you're playing against mobile players. and most mobile players are playing with a touchscreen. So if you want to get some easy wins, play Fortnite on the Switch. If you haven't played it in a while, definitely try it out. It's kind of ridiculous how insanely inept a lot of the other players are. So now, there's really no excuse not to have cross-platform play in your games. It would help if the game was developed with that in mind so you don't have technical issues like you do in something like Fortnite, but in most cases, it could be implemented in about a day, as Psyonix once said about Rocket League. The fact that it's taken Apex Legends this long to play nice is truly baffling, but then again, it's EA, and if anybody's not going to play nice in the gaming space, it's EA. But I'm excited to finally be playing Apex on my Switch later this year. I just hope that Activision is listening, because I'd much rather be playing Warzone on my Switch. I mean, I'd still be playing it on my PlayStation, but if it's on the Switch, I could take it anywhere, and LAN parties would be way easier. Call of Duty Warzone has some of the best cross-platform play I have ever seen, and cross-progression. This means that you can take your progress, your XP, your stats, your unlocked weapons, and your loadout and carry them over seamlessly to any platform. It blows my mind how well it works. Pokemon Unite will be out on Nintendo Switch and mobile, and we'll have cross-platform play across those, but cross-progression has not been explicitly announced, which is a little troubling. Knowing the Pokemon Company, there's gonna be some weird restrictions preventing this from being a seamless experience. So we all know how great cross-platform play is, but it's important to remember that this was just a pipe dream only 2 to 3 years ago. Now, it's something we might expect from multiplayer games. For some, it's as easy as just flipping a switch. For others, there might be some technical limitations. And for others, there might be some bureaucracy wrapped in a thin veil of technical limitations. I'm very happy with where we're at now, but I do hope that the next console generation opens up even more doors. And with Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo all taking seemingly different directions with their target markets, we can all just be one big happy family regardless of our console of choice. See, isn't that nice? A video with a happy ending. So what do you guys think about cross-platform play across all platforms, these new games that are coming out with cross-platform play, and what can we expect from cross-platform play and cross-progression in the future? Cross-progression is way cooler than just regular old cross-platform, but you know what? Baby steps. Leave it in the comments below, at me on Twitter, or any and all of this other social media garbage. I think the console that benefits the most from something like this is the Nintendo Switch, because being able to be at home and play these games on my PlayStation or Xbox is awesome, but then being outside and playing the same game on my Switch with all my progression would be amazing. Of course, we got new videos and live streams all the time. Our schedule is usually in a pinned tweet over on our Twitter, and we got Wulff Den live every single Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time here on YouTube. That's our live podcast where we can chat. And we got streams over on twitch.tv/WulffDen. That's also where we can chat. So if you're watching this video, I'm probably live right now. You can go over there and just talk to me there. But the most important thing that you can do to help this channel out is just subscribe. That way you know when we got new videos. And it's easy to do. And share this video with a friend who might be interested in a little bit of gaming history, or maybe is excited for some sort of situation like this as much as I am. Thank you guys very much. I love you. Of course, crossplay is a feature that everybody wants, but it's not as simple to implement as you might think. For example, in a game like Fortnite, it took a while for PlayStation to play along nice. But also, the version on the Nintendo Switch only runs at 30 frames per second. On all the other consoles, it runs at 60 frames per second. On mobile, it runs at 30 frames per second too. So the Nintendo Switch and mobile are pretty much the same. Crossplay is a feature that, of course, everybody would like.